People say 10 years is a long time, long enough to build a career, raise a child, mourn the dead, long enough, surely, to know whether a man loves you. But I was a fool who confused proximity with promise. I confused I need you for I choose you.
She was 20 years old the first time she heard John Obi laugh, and something in her chest answered it like a chord resolving. It was the University of Lagos, final year, and the city was loud and bright and full of futures. She remembers the specific quality of light that afternoon, gold and slow through the library windows, the kind that makes everything look like it already belongs in memory. John was sitting across the table from her, his architecture sketches spread between them like a private country, talking about the building he was going to design one day. Not if, when. She noticed the when immediately. She had not yet learned that confidence in a man's voice could sound exactly like a promise when it is not one. And their friendship grew the way certain things grow in Lagos, fast and tangled, and taking up more room than you planned for. He came to her for everything. She edited his final year presentation at 2 a.m, drinking cold tea while he paced the room and talked about load-bearing walls. She rewrote his cover letter 3 times before he got the internship at the firm in Victoria Island. When he called from the office on his first day, voice electric with newness, the first person he called was Gloria. She did not think to ask why she was always first. It felt too good to question. He told her once, leaning back in the plastic chair outside the faculty cafeteria, that she was different from other girls. She stored the sentence in a private place and returned to it often, the way you return to something you are not sure you own but cannot bring yourself to put down. She was not naive. She understood even then that you are different was not the same as I choose you. But she was 22 and in love, and love at 22 is almost entirely made of what you choose to believe. The first time she tried to close the distance between what they were and what she wanted them to be, he said it gently. The way you say something when you have practiced it. Gloria, I am not in a place for a relationship right now. I want to build something first. You understand, don't you? And she said she understood. She said it easily, without flinching, because she had already decided that understanding was what love required. What she did not say, that she would wait. But she decided it then, quietly. I like signing a contract no one else could see. The years pass the way time passes when you are looking at something else. Emeka came in 2016, solid, earnest, a civil engineer from Ibadan who brought her chin-chin on their second date and made her mother's eyes go soft with hope. Gloria ended it after 6 weeks. She told herself she was not ready. She did not examine the part of her that had checked her phone 3 times during their first dinner, waiting for John's name to appear. Then came Tunda in 2019, a doctor based in London with a voice like warm water and the kind of patience that should have been enough. The week she was considering saying yes to his question about visiting, John called from Lagos to tell her he had just won a major contract. His voice was so full of joy, it had no room for anything else. She stayed on the phone with him for 2 hours. She did not call Tunda back. Each man was a door she closed. She did not think of them as losses. She thought of them as choices freely made, purposeful, in service of something larger. She called it faithfulness. She did not yet have language for what it actually was, the slow, methodical dismantling of her own life in deference to a man who had never asked her to. Her mother watched. Mrs. Ngozi Benson was a woman who had raised 2 daughters with the particular Nigerian combination of deep love and restrained expression, and she had her elder daughter's face memorized in ways Gloria did not realize. She watched Gloria decline Emeka. She watched the Tunda situation resolve into silence. She prayed, as she always prayed, with the precision of a woman who knows God hears but also knows He asks us to help ourselves. Patricia, meanwhile, was 23 and luminous, and lived entirely in the present tense. She laughed too loudly at family dinners and changed her mind about things and went on dates that went nowhere and forgot about them by morning. Gloria watched her sister's lightness sometimes with something she refused to name as envy. She told herself she was simply built differently, more serious, more intentional. She told herself this often enough that it began to feel like identity. The dinner was in December 2022 at the family home in Enugu. The generator hummed outside. The aroma of ofe onugbu moved through the house like a presence of its own, and someone had strung small lights around the veranda that made everything amber and soft. It was the kind of evening that invites honesty. Her mother passed the EBA and asked, without looking up from the pot, "Gloria, are you and John together?" The table went quiet, in the particular way tables go quiet when a question has been in the air a long time before it is spoken. Gloria smiled, the smile she had perfected across 10 years of not saying the true thing. "We are close, Mummy," she said, "very close." Her mother said nothing more. She served the soup and the conversation moved on to other things. But across the table, Patricia looked up from her phone. She looked at Gloria with an expression that had no name yet, an expression that would only acquire its meaning later, when everything else had already happened. She had given 10 years of silent loyalty to a man who had never promised her anything. And she had done it with a smile. It began the way most quiet disasters begin, innocently, and in a home where the doors were always open. John Obi started visiting the Benson family compound in Enugu more frequently in the early months of 2022, always with some reasonable excuse tethered to his presence. A folder he needed Gloria to look over, a document she had offered to proofread, a meal he had been promised and had come to collect. Gloria was rarely there. She left early and returned late, the discipline of her career carved into the same patient, selfless shape as everything else in her life. But Patricia was always home. She was finishing her master's thesis on post-colonial urban housing, spread across the dining table in controlled chaos, highlighted journals, handwritten notes, her laptop tilted at the particular angle of someone who has been working too long. She cooked while she thought, stirring a goosey with one hand and reading with the other. She sang under her breath when she believed no one could hear her. She had her mother's laugh, wide and sudden, the kind that filled a room before you had time to prepare for it. John noticed all of it. He noticed the way she argued with her thesis supervisor over the phone, confident and unintimidated. He noticed that she teased him the first time they were properly alone together, something about architects always designing buildings they could never afford to live in, and that when he laughed, genuinely and freely, it surprised him. He had not laughed like that in some time. He stayed for lunch that day. He told himself it was because the jollof rice was exceptional. He came back the following week, and the week after that. The thing that must be understood about John Obi is that he was not a cruel man. He had never set out to use Gloria or to wound her. What he had done across 10 years was something more unconscious and therefore more devastating. He had confused the comfort she gave him with love. Gloria had made herself so essential, so warm, so present, so reliably there, that he had mistaken the architecture of her devotion for his own feeling. He leaned on her the way you lean on a wall, without ever considering that the wall might want something in return. It was only when Patricia arrived, carrying none of the history and none of the weight, that he understood the difference. With Patricia, he did not feel held up. He felt pulled forward. It was a sensation he had no prior name for. Patricia, for her part, had no map for what was happening either. She knew John was Gloria's friend, in the way she knew many things about her sister's life, the broad outlines, the general warmth, without the specific coordinates of grief. Gloria had never said, "I love him." Gloria had never said, "I am waiting for him." She had said, "We are close," and Patricia had taken that at its surface, because Gloria had always been a woman who said exactly what she meant to say, and no more. So Patricia followed the simple, irresponsible logic of her heart, which told her that this man made her feel the way the first cool breeze of November feels after months of Lagos heat, like relief, like a rival. Gloria came home one Thursday evening to find them in the kitchen together. John was standing at the counter eating ground nuts from a small bowl, and Patricia was seated on the counter the way she always sat, cross-legged, informal, entirely at ease, telling some story with her hands. They both looked up when Gloria entered. John said her name with the particular casualness of someone who has nothing to hide, which is also exactly how someone sounds when they have something to hide and have decided not to. Patricia jumped down from the counter and offered to warm food. Gloria said she had already eaten. She went to her room and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time in the dark. She did not let herself think the thought directly. She approached it sideways, the way you approach something you're not ready to name, and then she turned away from it entirely. She told herself she was tired. She told herself she was imagining things. She had 10 years of practice at talking herself out of the evidence of her own feelings, and she applied that practice now with the efficiency of someone who has made a discipline of self-betrayal. The small signs accumulated over the months that followed, each one easy to dismiss in isolation. Patricia blushing when his name was mentioned at the dinner table, and then quickly looking down at her plate. John's calls to Gloria growing shorter, less frequent, the easy intimacy replaced by something slightly formal, as though he were now aware of a distance he needed to maintain. A Sunday he was supposed to visit for the first time in 3 weeks, cancelling by text message with an apology that felt pre-written. And then came the evening in September, 3 months before the invitations were printed. Patricia came to Gloria's room and sat on the bed with the careful posture of someone carrying news they have rehearsed. Her face was a complicated thing, joy and guilt braided together in a way that should have told Gloria everything before a single word was spoken. "Sister," Patricia said, "there is someone I want you to meet. He makes me so happy." She was already reaching for her phone, already pulling up the photograph, holding it out with the open, unsuspecting hopefulness of a woman who does not yet know that the ground beneath her sister has just given way. Gloria took the phone. She looked at the face on the screen for a long time, long enough that the silence had its own texture. Long enough that a different woman, a woman who had not spent a decade learning to contain herself, might have cracked open. And then she handed the phone back and said, in a voice she had apparently always been capable of producing, steady as the floor beneath them, "He seems nice." She did not scream. She did not throw the phone. She simply folded herself back into the shape the world expected because she had been doing it for 10 years. There is a particular kind of strength that looks, from the outside, exactly like peace. Gloria had been cultivating it for years, the art of being present without being visible, of absorbing pain the way good fabric absorbs water, quietly, completely, showing nothing on the surface. In the 3 months between Patricia's confession and the wedding day, she deployed this strength with a totality that should have frightened her. It did not. By then, it was simply who she was. She went to the fabric market with Patricia on a Saturday in October. She sat beside her sister on a wooden bench while the trader unrolled A-so-okay in colours from cream to champagne, and she reached out and touched the fabric the way you touch something you are trying to feel neutral about. She said this one is beautiful when Patricia held up the ivory. She meant it in a fractured way. Patricia was beautiful in it. The fact that Gloria wanted to fold in half was a separate thing entirely, happening in a room inside her that she had sealed shut and painted over. She met John at the family engagement introduction ceremony in November. He was standing near the door when she arrived, in an agbada the colour of deep water, and for a single unguarded moment before he composed himself, and she saw something move across his face that she could not name. Guilt, perhaps, or the particular discomfort of a man confronting the full weight of what he has done without ever having done anything he could be directly accused of. He extended his hand. She took it. She said, "John, congratulations," in a voice so even, so warm, so completely constructed that Patricia, standing 3 feet away, smiled with relief. He mumbled something about hoping she was well. She said, "I am." She had never been less well in her life. The nights were the worst of it. Sleep, which had always come easily to Gloria, began to withdraw from her the way a tide withdraws gradually at first, then with a speed that left her stranded in the dark for hours. She lay in her flat in Lagos, on her back, watching the ceiling fan turn, listening to the compound sounds of night, a distant generator, someone's television, the irregular barking of a dog, and she let her mind go where she had forbidden it to go during the daylight hours. She went through the 10 years the way you go through a house before you leave it, opening every room, standing in each doorway, every phone call, every shared meal, every time she had swallowed the true sentence and replaced it with a manageable one. She began going to the coffee shop on Victoria Island before dawn, the same corner table, the same window, the same cold light arriving slowly over the lagoon. She drank her coffee and she did not read, and she did not scroll, and she did not call anyone. She simply sat with it. The grief was enormous, and she had no outlet for it. And so she carried it the way she had always carried things, internally, without complaint, with the posture of a woman who is fine. She prayed. Long, unglamorous, desperately honest prayers that sounded nothing like the composed woman she showed the world. She prayed on her knees on the cold tile of her bathroom floor at 2 a.m, forehead against her folded hands, asking God questions she already knew he would not answer directly. Why she had been so afraid. Why love had felt for 10 years like something she had to earn through silence rather than claim through speech. Whether she could be forgiven for the half-life she had chosen when the whole life had been there all along. If only she had been brave enough to reach for it. She called no one, not her closest friend Adeze, who would have been incandescent with righteous anger on her behalf, and whom Gloria therefore could not bear to tell. Not her colleague Bissy, who would have said something well-meaning that would have broken the seal on everything Gloria was working so hard to contain. She told no one because telling someone would have made it real in a way that living inside it alone somehow did not. Or perhaps because she had spent so long protecting everyone else from the inconvenience of her pain that she no longer knew how to do otherwise. Her mother knew anyway. Mrs. Ngozi Benson had her eldest daughter's face memorized at a cellular level, and the face that came home for Sunday rice in November was not the face of a woman who was fine. It was the face of a woman holding a structure together from the inside, every beam and joint under pressure, and the exterior walls still standing but only just. She waited until Patricia had gone to buy more tomatoes from the woman down the road. Then she came to stand beside Gloria at the kitchen sink and said, without preamble, without theatre, "Gloria, are you okay with all of this?" Gloria did not hesitate. She had rehearsed this answer in the coffee shop at 3 a.m. on the bathroom floor. "Mummy," she said, "she is my sister. Her happiness is my happiness." She even smiled briefly. Her mother looked at her for a long moment with the expression of a woman who knows the truth and has calculated that forcing it open will do more damage than leaving it closed. She nodded once. She went back to the stove. Neither of them spoke of it again. The night before the wedding, Gloria was alone in her room in the family house in Enugu, the compound outside carrying the cheerful noise of last preparations, relatives arranging chairs, someone testing the PA system, the smell of cooking already heavy in the air. She went to her wardrobe and reached to the top shelf where, behind folded wraps and an old hat box, she kept a manila folder. She brought it to the bed. Inside, 10 years, compressed into paper. A photograph from the University of Lagos library, the two of them laughing over his architectural drawings, her face tipped toward him, open and unguarded in the way she would never allow herself to be again. Printed chat messages from 2015, 2017, 2020, the ordinary intimacy of two people who existed in each other's daily texture without ever making it official. A birthday card she had never sent, a concert ticket stub from an evening she had counted privately, and as the best night of that year. She moved through each item slowly. She did not cry. She had cried herself dry somewhere around week 6 and had not found her way back to tears since. She simply looked, with the careful attention of someone completing a task they have been putting off, at the evidence of who she had been and what she had chosen and what it had cost her. Then she placed everything back in the folder, aligned the edges, and put it in the bottom drawer of her wardrobe beneath a winter blanket she never used in this climate. She closed the drawer with both hands, gently, the way you close something you are not throwing away but are no longer willing to carry. She sat on the edge of the bed. Outside, the generator hummed. Someone laughed, Patricia, unmistakably, the wide sudden laugh that filled whatever space it entered. The Gloria listened to it for a moment. Then she straightened her back and she made her decision. She would go to the wedding. Silence had protected her for 10 years. She was beginning to wonder if it had actually been a prison. She arrived late. This was intentional. She had calculated the timing the night before, lying awake in the family house with the compound outside finally quiet, working out that if she arrived after the processional, she would not have to watch Patricia walk past her in the aisle. She wore deep green, not black, which would have announced something, and not a colour bright enough to seem like she was trying. Deep green, simple, with the pearl earrings her mother had given her at 25. She looked, by every external measure, like a woman who had come to celebrate. And the church was full in the way only Nigerian weddings fill a space not just with bodies, but with intent, with investment, with the collective weight of a community that had turned out to witness and be witnessed. Aunties in matching ASO-OK occupied entire pews. Children in stiff formal clothes ran between legs until someone hissed them into stillness. The air smelled of perfume and flowers and the particular holiness of a space that has been prepared for something significant. Gloria found a seat near the back and folded her hands in her lap and looked toward the altar. John was already there. Navy suit, the kind of cut that spoke of money earned rather than inherited, his hands clasped before him with the stillness of a man composing himself. He was looking toward the doors, waiting, and in that profile the clean line of his jaw and the set of his shoulders, Gloria saw the man she had spent a decade constructing in her imagination, assembled piece by piece from 1,000 ordinary moments, until he had become something too large to be entirely a real person, and too real to be dismissed as illusion. She looked at him and felt both things simultaneously, the love that had never been claimed, and the first faint loosening of its hold. Then the doors opened and Patricia came in, and every thought Gloria had arranged so carefully dissolved. Her sister was radiant. There is no more precise word. The ivory lace caught the morning light through the stained glass and turned it into something almost sacred. Patricia moved with the unhurried joy of a woman who has no idea that anything in the world could be wrong, her face so completely open and so completely happy that Gloria, who had prepared herself for this moment across 3 months of careful private rehearsal, felt the preparation simply fail. She clapped with everyone else. She made her face do what it was supposed to do, but her throat closed around something enormous that she did not allow herself to release. The ceremony was long in the way that ceremonies are long when you are concentrating very hard on remaining intact. There were prayers and scripture and a sermon about covenant that the pastor delivered with the unhurried confidence of a man who has given it many times. There were vows spoken in voices too low for the back rows to hear. There was a ring placed on a finger while the congregation held its breath and then exhaled together in a sound like wind moving through grass. Gloria exhaled with them. She was, as she had always been, composed. And the reception was held in a hall connected to the church grounds, already transformed into the specific splendor of a Nigerian family that has saved and planned, and will not be modest about either. There were high table arrangements and a live band and a master of ceremonies whose voice filled the room with a warmth that felt genuinely celebratory. Gloria moved through it all with the careful invisibility she had perfected, greeting relatives, accepting small plates of food she didn't eat, appearing in photographs at the edge of family groupings with her bag held in both hands like a small shield. She was doing well. She told herself she was doing well. Another hour, perhaps 2, and she could leave with her dignity undisturbed and her silence intact. And 10 years of loving someone in secret would remain exactly that. Secret. It undisturbing. Survivable. Then John looked at her. He was across the room, laughing at something a cousin had said, leaning back with the ease of a man surrounded by people who are celebrating him. And in the middle of that laugh, he turned his head, and his eyes found hers across the full width of the hall. It lasted perhaps 2 seconds. In those 2 seconds, the band continued playing, and the conversations continued around them, and the children continued racing between tables, and none of it mattered, because in those 2 seconds, Gloria understood something she had been circling for months without being able to land on it directly. He knew. He had always known. Not just that she loved him, he had known that for years, the way you know a fact you have decided not to examine too closely. He knew what he was taking from her by standing at that altar. He knew, and he had calculated, as she had always calculated, that her silence could be relied upon. That patient Gloria, devoted Gloria, the woman who always understood and never demanded, would absorb this too, would fold herself into the required shape, would wish them well and mean it and cause no disruption and take her grief home and keep it there. He looked away. He turned back to Patricia and drew her close with the easy possessiveness of a man who has gotten what he wanted, and something in Gloria's chest, some last remaining hinge, simply gave way. She stood. She was not aware of deciding to stand. Her body made the decision before her mind could negotiate against it, before the 10 years of practiced restraint could reassert themselves. She moved through the room past the dancing couples, past the table of aunties whose conversation stopped as she passed them, past the master of ceremonies who was mid-sentence when she reached the small raised platform and picked up the microphone, and the feedback loop of her touch on it sent a sound through the hall that silenced everything. She was aware of her mother's face going the color of paper somewhere to her left. She was aware of Patricia turning, confused, her hand still in John's. She was aware of the specific quality of silence that falls over a large room when something unrehearsed is happening and no one yet knows whether to be alarmed. She spoke clearly, without performance, without the trembling drama the moment might have warranted. She said that she had loved John Obi for 10 years. She said this plainly, in the way you state a fact that has been kept in a drawer too long, not with bitterness, but with the relief of finally setting down something heavy. She said she had never told him. She said that was her mistake, and she owned it fully, without deflection. She looked at Patricia and said that she wished her sister happiness that was real and lasting, and completely deserved. And she meant every word of it, because love, even broken love, does not stop wanting good things for the people connected to it. And then she said the thing she had not known she needed to say until the microphone was in her hand and the room was listening, and 10 years of silence had reached the exact point beyond which they could not be sustained. I am done waiting for anyone to choose me. From today, I choose myself. She set the microphone on the table with a care that was somehow more devastating than any dramatic gesture could have been. She walked to her sister. She cupped Patricia's face in both hands and kissed her on the cheek, and held it a moment longer than necessary. She turned to John and extended her hand, and he took it, and she felt the handshake move through her like a closing door. Then she turned and walked the full length of the hall, through the silence that parted for her like water, and out into the afternoon light of Enugu, where the world was loud and indifferent, and entirely unaware that something had just ended and something else had just begun. She had walked into that room carrying 10 years. She walked out carrying only herself, and herself, it turned out, was enough. The messages came first. They always do. I'm in the aftermath of a Nigerian family event that has gone sideways of expectation, a flood of voices arriving through every available channel, each carrying its own particular reading of what had happened and what it meant. Aunties who had been at the reception sent long voice notes full of concern that was threaded through with judgment. Cousins texted brief and carefully neutral things. A family friend she barely knew called twice and left no message. Her mother's sister from Port Harcourt sent a scripture without preamble or context, which was its own kind of verdict. Gloria read them all. She replied to none of them. This was not rudeness, it was economy. She had spent 10 years spending her energy on other people's emotional requirements, and she was, at last, beginning to account for the cost. She drove back to Lagos 2 days after the wedding, alone, the expressway stretching ahead of her into the flat morning light. She had expected to feel hollowed. Instead, she felt something she had no precise word for, yet a rawness, yes, but underneath it, something almost like spaciousness. As though a weight had been removed that she had carried so long, she had forgotten it was not simply part of her body. She called the therapist's office the morning after she returned. She had been given the number by a colleague 2 years earlier and had kept it in her phone the way you keep certain things, not because you intend to use them, but because some part of you knows the day will come. The appointment was on a Thursday. She sat in a clean, unhurried room in Lekki and said for the first time aloud to another human being, as the full unedited version of the past 10 years. She did not perform composure. She did not manage the story into something more palatable. She simply said it, all of it, the way she had said things into the dark for months. Except now someone was there to receive it. She cried in the session and was surprised to find it felt less like breaking and more like release of pressure, the way the sky looks after rain, not diminished, but cleared. The job promotion she had declined in September, a senior position in the firm's Abuja office, turned down because it required travel, and she had told herself she was not ready, though the reason she did not examine directly, was that John was in Lagos. She called her manager and asked whether it was still available. It was. And she accepted it on a Tuesday and felt the ground beneath her shift into something more solid. She bought canvas and oil paints from a small art supply shop in Surulere on a Saturday afternoon in February, 6 weeks after the wedding. She had not painted since she was 24, when John had said, in that offhand way he said things that lodged themselves like splinters, that it was a beautiful hobby but hardly practical for a woman building a career. She had agreed. She had agreed without examining the agreement, and the paints had dried and the canvases had gathered dust, and eventually she had stopped thinking about it. Now she stood in the shop smelling linseed oil and turpentine, and something in her chest that had been folded very flat for a very long time began, cautiously, to unfold. She painted badly for the first 2 weeks. And by the 3rd week she was painting something that looked like what she had actually intended, which felt like a small private victory of a kind she was learning to count. Patricia came to Lagos for the first time on a Sunday in January, arriving at Gloria's flat in the late afternoon with a container of their mother's ofe akwu and the expression of a woman who has rehearsed an entrance and then abandoned the rehearsal at the door. They sat at the kitchen table. For a long time, neither of them said the direct thing, and the air between them was thick with everything that needed to be said, and the mutual understanding that saying it would require a kind of courage neither had fully assembled yet. It was Patricia who spoke first. She said, "I did not know, sister. I want you to know that I did not know." And Gloria looked at her younger sister's face, which was carrying a guilt it had not chosen and would not easily set down. And she believed her completely, and this made it both simpler and more complicated than anger would have been. Anger has a shape you can hold. Grief that has no villain is harder to resolve. They talked for 3 hours. They did not resolve everything. They did not pretend to. But they were still at the table when the sun went down, and they ate together from the same container, and this was its own kind of beginning. Patricia visited weekly after that. The conversations evolved slowly, the way trust re-establishes itself not in declarations, but in small, accumulated acts of showing up. And there were sessions that ended in tears, and sessions that ended in laughter, and a few that ended in the particular silence of 2 people who have said everything available to them for that day. The road between them was long, and neither of them pretended otherwise. But they were walking it. John Obi, in the weeks that followed, was by all visible measures well. The marriage was new and absorbing. His work continued its steady ascent. He was, in the ordinary sense of the word, fine. And yet there was a moment, a Tuesday evening in February, Patricia having gone to visit a friend, the flat quiet around him when he found Gloria's number in his contacts and held his thumb over the call button for a long time. He was not sure what he would have said. Perhaps nothing of use. Perhaps nothing that would have undone any of the architecture of the past 10 years, or redistributed its cost more fairly. He closed the screen without pressing call. He put the phone face down on the table and sat with himself for a while in the dark, and in that sitting he understood, with the particular clarity that comes only when there is no audience, that there are debts you accrue in the living of a life that no single act of acknowledgement can retire. He would carry it. It was, by any accounting, the least he could do. 6 months after the wedding, on a bright Wednesday morning in June, Gloria Benson sat at her usual corner table in the coffee shop on Victoria Island. The same chair, the same window. Outside, Lagos performed its perpetual, indifferent theatre of movement and noise. But inside, and the cup in front of her was warm. She had arrived only 20 minutes ago and had ordered intentionally, with appetite, with the decisiveness of someone who knows what she wants and sees no reason to delay it. She was not staring out the window. She was writing, her notebook open, her pen moving, the early chapter of an article she had been commissioned to write for a design journal about sustainable housing in Lagos's informal settlements. On the shelf behind her, the old clock that used to keep time above her stillness had been replaced sometime in the past months. She wasn't sure when by a small painting of a bird suspended mid-flight, wings neither fully open nor closed, caught in the precise moment of becoming. The man who sat across from her did so with the slightly apologetic energy of someone who is interrupting and knows it. She looked up. He had warm eyes and the kind of face that arranges itself easily into openness. He said, "I am sorry to bother you. You are Gloria Benson. I read your piece in Vanguard last month, the one about housing policy. It was really something." She looked at him for a moment. Then she smiled. Not the careful one, the constructed and load-bearing smile she had maintained across 10 years of containing herself. The other one, the one that arrived without architecture, without calculation, that belonged entirely to the present tense. "Thank you," she said. "Sit down." She had waited 10 years for someone to see her. She was only just beginning to understand that she had always been worth seeing, and that the only person who had failed to see that was herself.
Thank you for being here with us. What do you think about Gloria, Patricia, and John? Let's know your thoughts in the comment section.